Yo, growing a business is kind of tricky right now. Supply chains are squeezed, tariffs and trade policies are dynamic, and cash flow, it's tighter than ever. You need clarity to come out on top. Without it, you risk falling behind. If only you could hop in the DeLorean and see the future, right? Thankfully, there's NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite has real-time forecasting to help you move ahead with confidence. This is your AI-powered business management suite and the #1 cloud ERP. Trusted by over 42,000 businesses, NetSuite brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR all under one roof. It's your single source of truth, giving you the data and control you need to move quickly. And with AI built in, you can automate the busy work and focus on strategy. NetSuite helps you see what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast. If I were running a business with a lot of moving parts, I'd use NetSuite for full control over everything. Tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/SPI. That's netsuite.com/SPI. The perfect product launch. It's the goal for every brand marketer. High heat, fast sellout, and fans posting recipes like trophies. What do Sydney Sweeney's soap drop, Taylor Swift's tickets, and your next launch have in common? Well, they're not bought, they're bragged about. Fanfare turns your drop into a moment. Fanfare cues real fans, blocks bots, and builds launch experiences worth screenshotting. Want hype without the heartbreak? Get Fanfare's 5-step hype drop playbook with our proven success formula and make your next launch unforgettable at fanfare.io/playbook. Again, fanfare.io/playbook.
The multiple for selling a software is incredible. If you're selling a website, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 times EBITDA, which is like the profit, if you will. But when you start looking at, like I say, a one-off software, you're looking at 6 to 8. And if you're in a SaaS, which is software as a service, you're well over 10 times annual reoccurring revenue. You might even be into 20 times. And so it's a very valuable asset, especially if you have profitability or you're showing any type of growth. There are a lot of private equity groups that would love to have a cash generating SaaS that's growing.
A couple Fridays ago in session 772, I'd mentioned that I was starting a new software and that I was going to take you along for the ride. Well, we're still in the early days of this journey together, but I wanted to bring on a couple people who've been very influential in how this is being built. In fact, I've done software before and I failed completely, tried it again a little later, did much better with a single developer, and this time I'm working with a professional software development company called Surge Global. And that was founded by Banuka, who we're speaking with today, as well as his partner, Dave Chesson. Now, Dave was known as the Kindlepreneur. He still is. He helps people publish Kindle books, and he's since developed several pieces of software for authors. And now he's also created a lot of other kinds of software, partnered with people in other markets to create software alongside Surge Global here. And we're going to talk about all the ins and outs of creating software. When does it make sense? What might you need to know up front? How much might you need to spend? What are some of the hidden costs? And how can you make the developer to entrepreneur relationship a little better? What's communication like? And how do you stack things in your favor to make this work? I want to know these things because I want this development journey to work as well. So anyway, let's dive into it. This is session 775 of the SPI podcast with Dave Chesson and Banuka from Surge Global. Here they are.
You're listening to the Smart Passive Income Podcast, a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network, a show that's all about working hard now so you can sit back and reap the benefits later. And now your host, he still gets camera shy before he hits record, Pat Flynn.
Welcome to the SPA podcast, Dave and Banuka. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited.
We're going to have a lot of fun things to chat about, especially in the world of software development. I think there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to figure out a way to solve a problem or to automate something. And it's something that I'm doing at this very moment. I shared a little bit about it on a previous podcast, and we'll bring people up to speed in just a minute. But I do want to catch people up, in fact, with you, Dave, first. We'll start with you because you've been on the show before. You're known as the Kindlepreneur, and you were early on in the days of helping people write ebooks and publish them, and you've helped make a lot of people very, very successful in the world of self-publishing. Are you still focused on that? And maybe just quickly, how have things changed since the last time you were on the show in that realm?
Well, I still work in Kindlepreneur and I'm always developing it. The thing, though, was that after building the website and having a market and people sign up for my email list, it became evident where I actually knew what the industry needed. There were a couple of problems that I really wanted to solve. So it was at that time that I started looking at all the different sets of software or services that were out there. And there was nothing that I thought at the time was really solving the real problem. And so my first project was building Publisher Rocket. And that was my first real big foray into software. And since then, it's something that I've gotten heavily involved in because it's done so much for me and my business and has allowed me to be a creator. And it's just neat to be an author and then say to yourself, oh man, wouldn't it be nice if, and then turning around and building that thing. And so that's really been where I've been kind of in the headspace.
That's amazing. And so what was it like for an entrepreneur, a creator, somebody who wrote books and published blog posts and did videos? What's the big mental shift that needs to happen before even experimenting or exploring the world of building software?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It was very scary to do at first. The first time I did a set of software is I wanted to build a simple tool, just something to put on my website. Back in the day, it was the Kindle calculator. And it was just a simple thing where somebody could go in and take the Amazon bestseller rank of the book on Amazon, put it into this calculator, and it would tell you basically how many books that day that person had sold. This was really cool. You'd think it'd be very simple. Well, I went to Upwork and I just kind of put the job up there and I got wild ranges of prices. You know, somebody saying a couple $100 and even a couple people saying tens of thousands of dollars. And I was just like, I didn't know what was right. I didn't know what was the right thing to do. I'm not a programmer. I've never written code. I still don't to this day. So how does someone like me kind of figure that out? Well, I was very fortunate enough to be connected with a good company and was able to talk with them. And we were able to build a very simple tool. And what was really neat about that was that just by doing that one simple tool, it made my website stick out. It became like the one go-to place where if anybody wrote an article about how to self-publish a book, there was almost always a section where they're like, oh, just go to this calculator and figure out, if your book idea is going to make money. And it really put my website on the map. And that was like 10 years ago. So then taking that next step and realizing there's a much bigger software that could be built and that I know that my market would love this. If I could just create it, it would do great. So then it was the next challenge, right? Which is how do you build a large software? And so this is where getting connected with Bonica and his company Surge was that first real big step for me. And since then, I've focused more on just kind of learning about the business of software is the way I put it. Kind of, hey, if I want to be a really good client, what kind of things do I need to understand? I can't just kind of come up to, a software team and just say, well, I'd like to make Uber, but better. Can you do that? Instead, it's really fleshing out the idea, understanding what I really want it to do, how I want my customers to feel, what they should experience, and packaging that together. That's really what I've focused on. And that's what's allowed me to then go to a company like Surge and say, okay, guys, let's build this together. And that's kind of the shift that's happened for me.
That's amazing. Bonica, we'll get to you in just a second. I need to tell a quick story here. And I think a lot of people have heard this story where I've failed as a person who had wanted to build software before because I didn't have the information that we're about to talk about, all the ins and outs and the things that you need to prepare before even going in. I think it's really easy for an entrepreneur with the entrepreneur mindset to go, oh, here's a problem. I want to solve it. Hey, developer, make this. And it just doesn't work like that. There's a lot more that's involved, and we'll get into that for sure. But I've failed once big time in early 2010, 2011. A couple friends were creating WordPress plugins and they did really well and my audience was bigger and I was like, ooh, $signs. And it just was a very expensive lesson. Later, I created the Ask Pat podcast player and that worked out really, really well. And then all of us on the call right now are working on another software that is really exciting. And the process that we've taken through is already night and day compared to what I've done before. Like I already know this is going to turn into something amazing. And Bonica, you and your company have been incredible to work with already. And I know we're in the beginning stages of it right now. Before we get into what a person listening might need or need to think about that would benefit the developer to create something amazing for them, I want to get into your story. Tell me a little bit about Surge and how you became the founder and kind of what were you doing even before that?
Yeah, so I come from a traditional kind of Asian household. Mom's a doctor, dad's a doctor, brother's a doctor. I was studying to be one. And, in our family, you either figured out how to become one or you end up as a failure. I, despite that background, I decided to go to my parents that I wanted to be a professional YouTuber. And that was not a conversation that was going to go down well.
Oh, man.
The YouTuber was also in the video game space. So it's like a double whammy, right? When I was about 17, 18, I realized that you could actually make money playing video games. We had a channel up. We had what is, then called the multi-channel network, an MCN. And we had convinced people to play Pokemon and Minecraft and League of Legends and created a whole bunch of content. And we monetized it. For me, being 18 years old, living in Sri Lanka, I was kind of living the dream. I was getting paid to play video games. Now, unfortunately, when we were just picking up, we'd started getting a couple of million views a month across the network. YouTube decided to shut us down and say, hey, look, monetization that was available for you was because it was on a beta program. Right now, we're only going to allow monetization for these specific countries. And unfortunately, Sri Lanka was not one of the list. Now, we had a business. And as an entrepreneur, this is really tricky because I had just decided to stop my exams and pursue this full time. And as soon as I started, I got this message saying, congratulations, you've been shut down. I obviously didn't want to tell my parents that they were right and this whole thing collapsed. So instead, what I did was I lied to them for about 6 months and pretended everything was okay. Now, being the 18, 19-year-old I was at the time, I wasn't necessarily fiscally responsible either. So any money we had made, we had spent on kind of rebuying items in game and calling it an investment. Fortunately for us, a couple businesses had reached out and said, hey, you're doing this thing on YouTube. Can you help us with our YouTube channels, not in the video game space, but to create some content? This was about a decade ago. And to me, the idea that someone was going to pay us money to create content was wild. Now, obviously, common sense. But back at the day, because we were always getting compensated based on the views we got, not exactly the content we were creating. It was a very new idea. That really was the beginning point for us to start Surge. It was a YouTube kind of content creation agency. And we would, listen to podcasts like SPI and kind of all these places to learn from people to understand what they were doing. And I don't know if you noticed that, like the first way I learned how to build a website was through one of your videos where you had long form content of, putting a WordPress website together, how to monetize that. And
That's crazy.
it's a surprisingly small world. We went from helping businesses manage their YouTube channels to managing their social media. And then naturally what would happen is they would come up and say, hey, we need websites done. We need help with SEO. We didn't have any technical exposure in the subject. So what we would do is turn around to them and say, we could absolutely do it. Go on YouTube, learn how to do it, and then sell it back to them. And that's really how we started. We grew into a couple of people. The social media naturally turned into websites. Websites became more and more complicated, and we were forced to learn engineering. And that journey has kind of taken us 10 years today, where we have about 300-400 people. And what we had self-learned, we're now deploying technology solutions to governments all over the world and like really high-profile organizations, which is, looking back at it, it's somewhat mind-blowing as well.
That's incredible. I have many questions. The first one being, what do your parents think now?
So now they're okay for two reasons. Number one is that the reason they wanted me to do medicine is not because they wanted me to be a doctor. It's because they can tell their cousins and aunts and friends and family that their kids are both doctors.
Very relatable.
So now it's somewhat okay. And the second thing is I recently got engaged, and in a weird twist of fate, she also happens to be a doctor. So they're like, he didn't quite make it, but she did. And because of that, I think I'm okay.
That is absolutely insane. Well, first of all, congratulations on the engagement, and I'm glad the parents are okay. So you said 400 people working now in the company?
That's right, yes.
And what is it that Surge is known for really now? I know it's software, but what kinds of companies are you working with here?
So we like to go by the capabilities we have. So we say we're the best in class at design, marketing, and technology. What we've noticed is in the modern day, if business is going to be successful, they need to be able to really, truly leverage the internet. And to be able to do that, there are really three things. One, you need to build good technology products, or your business has to extend into technology in any way, shape, or form. That's the first step. The second step is once you have a base that's built, you need to be able to acquire users, whether it's in the form of social media, running ads, creating content, or generating demand. And if you can do those two things well, really design and how users interact with the product and services you build is the next piece of the puzzle. And if you can do those three things really well, you can really build and design any business. So we like to think of ourselves as somewhat of a guide that can help you navigate those three spaces because we have experts within that field that have kind of done that at all different shapes and sizes. About half the team works with the US. So we have a core US focus, but as of recently, we've been very heavy across the Middle East, different parts of Europe and Australia. And that's kind of where our work kind of sits at the moment.
Amazing. What's surprising to me, and Dave, when we got on a call together, and shout out to our buddy Spencer Haas who connected us on this. I didn't know you were doing software in the way that you're doing it. And I didn't know you have this connection with Serge and Vanuka and the company. When you had mentioned we have a bunch of developers working for us and they're amazing. They're over in Sri Lanka. It's like, Sri Lanka? I didn't know there was this incredible ecosystem of engineers over there. And my mind has been blown with the quality that is coming from this country. Final question to you, Vanuka, before we go back to Dave, but what is incredible about the Sri Lankan workforce that talk it up? What have we been missing this whole time?
Look, I think Sri Lanka has had an incredibly tough rap over the years. We've come out of a 30-year civil war. We've kind of overcome terrorism as a country that was basically built on tourism going through COVID. It's been a really rough patch. We have a group of incredibly resilient people that are, we have like a 96% literacy rate, one of the highest in the world. And we have a group of people that are incredibly skilled and are willing to go the extra mile that the world doesn't really know about. Part of the reason why I'm really excited to get up in the morning and do what I do is the work that we do and we help with really puts everyone at that, giving them that opportunity to build something spectacular. Majority of the people that work for the business are the primary breadwinners in the home. We have built such a strong culture and community around the work we do, and to be able to do what we do and take it to the world is something that I'm truly grateful for.
That's incredible. Dave, I know it's been awesome to work with the teams over in Sri Lanka, but let's get into a little bit of brass tacks and what needs to happen. If a person listening has a software idea, before even reaching out to a developer, what are the things that now, in your experience, we need to consider before that? What should we know before getting into this? And just to set the stage, how many softwares have you developed now and have launched?
So I've done 7. And they've ranged from, we talked about Publisher Rocket, which is a book marketing software. And by the way, just the extensiveness of that software, MarketWatch listed it as one of the top 10 book marketing companies in the world. So what it does is pretty robust. But also, too, we did Atticus.io, which is a book formatting and writing software that it has grown so dramatically. But the challenges inside of it, because it's not just a book writing formatting, it's writing, collaboration, and formatting all together. So I like to tell people if Scrivener, Google Docs, and Vellum got together and had a baby, its name would be Atticus. So it's just a very complicated thing. But we also built a software called FFL Safe, which is a federal firearms licensing software. For anybody who's pro or con weapons, what it does is it allows the legal process to basically, as in if somebody buys a weapon, there has to be documentation, there has to be proper according. So for both sides of that coin, it's a software that really supports both. But we're talking about ATF legal documents. And so, we built something that's absolutely stellar and is growing. And then of course, HRIS systems, just a slew of things. And so for me, it's been wonderful because I've seen kind of the power of having a strong programming team to kind of combine with what you want. And so to answer your question, Pat, I think there's a couple of things that are really important for people to understand. And one is, if you are going to an individual programmer, let's say you find one programmer, you're like, okay, I'm going to work with this person. I think it's very important that you have a lot more of your ducks in a row. I think that there's a lot of things that you need to do prior to working with them. I've had the benefit of working with Serge's team, and a lot of times they've been the ones that kind of popped a question back to me and be like, well, have you thought about this? Hey, just a heads up, here's a problem we see because we've looked at kind of the project scope. But regardless of whether you're working with one person or a team that has a lot of experience and can provide you with kind of business thoughts or maybe some really key questions to help you be like, oh man, I didn't think about that. Good call. That's good. We figured this out now. One thing I do like to do as an exercise is that I like to build sort of a super basic wireframe. And you can either do that with PowerPoint presentation where you just create boxes. There's a software that I've enjoyed in the past called Balsamic, which is just kind of a drag and drop WYSIWYG thing. But we're not making something beautiful. What I do is I try to say, okay, if the person comes to the home page, the first page on the software, what do I want them to click? What are the things I offer them? And then you go and say, okay, when they click here, what happens then? And as I walk through this process, all of a sudden I start thinking to myself too, oh boy, maybe I shouldn't do that. Oh, that's conflicting. That's hard. And so it really helps me to kind of understand the project at scope. But that being said, is that that's something you can skip if you're working with a dedicated team that has a lot of experience, because they'll be the ones that will then have somebody there to say, okay, Dave, sit down, let's do this together and let's walk through this and make sure we have a very solid project scope.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you know what problem you're solving, there's a few things here. Number one, I've seen people who have gotten really excited about software and they'll actually go really hard with like the look of it, the design. And they're like, this is it. They're like, here's the homepage. It's going to be amazing. But once they start developing, they hadn't thought about how a person's actually going to use this thing or what button goes where or like what the actual functions are. They're just like, here's the website. It looks cool. And here's the promise. And now let's go build a thing. And like you said, if you're working with a team who's experienced, then they can help you connect the dots with that. And if not, I know from experience that it's going to be a lot of other people just kind of trying to figure it out on their own and kind of making up answers on the go. And this was the problem with my first go. I was working with an individual who I didn't communicate with properly and wasn't asking questions and just kind of filling in the gaps. And they were not the gaps that I wanted filled. And it was just a terrible experience. But the idea of wireframing, I think, is really key because it really makes you think about how a person is going to be using this. It helps you understand what the most important parts are here as well, so that you don't overdevelop it, which I know is a problem, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit. Feature creep is what they call. But Nuka, from your end, receiving like wireframes and that kind of thing, like, do you have any tips for a person who's going to be doing that? Are there better ways to submit that or to showcase what a flow might look like? Or what are the things that make it easier for you, for the dev team?
So the biggest problem that we see is that when we interface with scenarios where we don't go ahead and do a build or we decide not to take a project, it's because the person that's building the project doesn't necessarily have a clear understanding of what they're trying to build. And it manifests itself in different ways. The first thing is, if you're going to go to an individual developer and you say, hey, I want this thing built. Technology has really evolved over the years where things and different components have been specialized. Very rarely will you find one person with all the different skills that can design the front end, design the back end, manage the cloud, security, the servers, and all of the different pieces of the puzzle, and still make the product look good and function well. As a founder or as an entrepreneur, the thing that you need to understand is, what is the problem that you're solving? And what are the typical customers going to go through in order to solve that problem? And in the industry, we do this thing called journey mapping, where you define what the user's problem is and draw out the journey that they're going to go through to be able to solve the problem. And you'll be able to identify the issues and problems along the way as that customer potentially uses your piece of technology to solve that problem. And wireframing is a part of that experience, because once you understand, okay, I want to build a product that can, and Dave mentioned Uber, to get from point A to B. What happens when person clicks A and they realize there's no vehicle nearby? What should the technology itself do in those scenarios? And you start to ask the right questions about the product. And when we go into this, usually when we talk to companies that are not as mature in their process or haven't built their first product or haven't launched their technology, it's really a nice discovery process where they understand that there's a lot more to the pieces of the puzzle, and they understand that this may be slightly more complicated than they think. Because if you're going at like a very high level, I want to be able to do this, and you're not really putting the time and energy to think about it, it may seem like a rather simple task. which is why when you talk to different businesses, and you'll hear this all the time, you will get a quote for $100 and $100,000. And as a layperson, it's very difficult to sit behind that two numbers and understand what is the difference between a $100 project and a $100,000 project or a $100 million project, because they don't really understand the depth of it. They don't understand the scope of the project. What we've seen works best is when our customers have spent a considerable amount of time trying to clearly articulate the problem that they're trying to solve so that we can together discover what that journey mapping process is like.
Yes, very, very well said. And even in our experience working together on the new tool that I'm building, before we even got to wireframes, we talked about that journey. I remember emails going back and forth between us where it was just bullet points. User does this, then this happens, and they go here. And what was really helpful, I think, were two things. Number one, I've been trying to solve this problem myself, or I figured out a way to solve it by hacking 12 different websites to make this giveaway situation work, and it works. And I've done it over and over and over again for over 2.5 years, that I was easily able to articulate the sort of current state of what I tried to do. And you came back and your team came back with, okay, so if this is what we were trying to automate, here is a user journey or a journey map that can happen. User does this, they click on this, and then they create a profile, that we get their address. And then I saw that and I was like, no, I don't think we need to make a profile. We want to make this as frictionless as possible. And already we're solving problems before anything is developed, before anything is designed. We're having an understanding based on what the person who's ultimately going to be using this thing is doing versus just the end goal being we want the giveaways to be automated. So totally works. And the map or the journey is really, really key. So I hope all of you listening are paying attention to that, because you might be at a stage now where you're already starting to think about hiring a developer. Well, think about the journey that they go on now and think about how much easier it will be when they have the software. Unfortunately, sometimes if you don't think about that, the journey after the software could be even more confusing or harder. And that's not what we want either.
Just a couple things to add to that. You're spot on. The part of the reason why the process was a lot easier with you, Pat, is because you understand the problems that the customer is facing, because you are the customer in this context. You've used the same thing for 2.5 years. You know exactly what you want out of sheer practice. And then the other thing that you need to be able to do is when we're building a product, you don't want to add all the bells and whistles to design the most complicated piece of software. You want to build what is an MVP, the smallest functional unit to solve the problem. In the case of Uber, it's getting from point A to point B. Everything else is irrelevant. In the case of your project, there is a very, very bare bones set of things that need to be done to know that the product is valuable. A couple of good things that happen from that. The first thing is you're able to reduce the time to build a prototype so you know whether the business is working or not. And as that process, you kind of fine tune that, that's where 80% of all the function actually remains. Everything else is an edge case. So you're able to build the most seamless journey for the user, which ends up intentionally or unintentionally building the best business. So you always want to make sure you're optimizing to build the lightest, quickest, fastest thing first. And once you're there, once you have millions and millions of users, sure, you can figure out how to architect in a way where it can work at enterprise levels and all of that. But for 90% of the people that's kind of launching their first software project, they need to not design, and it's very counterintuitive because when you go to a developer, your instinct tells you to get the most bang for your buck. So you give a list of all the things that you want, when in reality, you're supposed to reduce it to the one thing that makes the most sense for your business. And that's where I think majority of the people start to mess up.
Yeah, amen to that. With running your own business, legal questions always come with the territory. Like, can I use this contract or agreement? What do I do if a client doesn't pay? Am I even structured the right way for taxes? Instead of Googling your way through legal landmines, imagine having a law firm ready to address your business's legal needs without the sticker shock. That's what you get with Legal Shield's small business plans. Legal Shield helps entrepreneurs access real legal help on contract reviews, collection letters, business formation guidance, and even help navigating IRS audits. Members can schedule consultations, upload documents through the app, and get support from a provider law firm that knows small business laws in your state. Plus, consultations on taxes or trademarks help you stay ahead of potential problems. And if a client is late on a payment, Legal Shield steps in with professional collection letters so you can protect your hard-earned revenue, all for a fraction of the price of hiring a lawyer on your own. Go to LegalShield.com/SPI or call 833-570-9980 to learn more and get big business legal support without a big business budget. That's LegalShield.com/SPI. While DIY website tools are everywhere, most fall short on design and performance. Hit publish. Framer ships your site worldwide in seconds. No code, no compromises. Framer is a powerful, user-friendly platform that delivers developer-level results without writing a single line of code. Make your designs move and convert with Framer. Framer brings your site to life with powerful animations, dynamic content handling, and a design-first approach that helps your site stand out. Framer is the design-first, no-code website builder that lets anyone ship a production-ready site in minutes. Browse hundreds of pixel-perfect templates or even design something of your own on a totally blank canvas. Add bold animations like appear effects, text effects, scroll and looping animations, and much more in seconds. And it's free to start. The built-in AI handles the heavy lifting of generating starter layouts and can even translate your entire site to any language. On the back end, you'll get responsive breakpoints, built-in hosting, a flexible CMS, and privacy-friendly analytics. Ready to build a site that looks hand-coded without hiring a developer? Launch your site for free at Framer.com and use code SPI to get your first month of pro on the house. That's Framer.com, promo code SPI. Framer.com, promo code SPI. Rules and restrictions may apply. Next, I want to talk about money. Dave, from your end, as somebody who is going to be investing money into the development of a software, what business decisions or thoughts are you having related to the finances? Have you ever had an opportunity to create a software, but then it just didn't make sense financially to do? What's going on in your head related to the numbers?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do with software, because software is not exactly cheap. I mean, it depends on exactly what you're building and the complexity of it. But personally, I like actually having the market and understanding the market before I build the product. There's a lot of people that kind of sit back and say, oh man, I've got this $1 million idea. It's just a great idea. And I say, okay, great. Do you know how to reach the customers? And if the answer is no, it's what I call a speculative project. Okay, you're speculating that you can build something and it's going to be so good that it will just connect with people. That does happen, but I personally don't like to do that. What helped with me was that I had Kindlepreneur, the website. You know, I'd built a following, learning from Smart Passive Income over the years. And because I had a following, I was always studying and learning. I was listening. I was responding to emails. I heard people's problems. I knew that there was a real need for this product, not just myself. And so for me, it was a small investment in order to build something that I knew would not only resonate for myself, but also for my fans. And so therefore, it wasn't very speculative. And I've kind of applied that same principle when building out the next software. The other thing that I've done too is in the past, I've partnered with people who have said market, and I've come in and worked with them to build the software for their market. And that's been a wonderful thing because with the experience of building a couple of sets of successful software, it's allowed me to kind of step in and say, hey, I tell you what, I'll walk you through this process. You know, in the meantime, you've got this market. Let's combine together and do something really cool. So those are some of my thoughts on how I like to approach software. But again, that doesn't mean that just because you don't have the market that you can't do it. There's a great couple of books. By the way, I'm going to take a second and I'm going to highly recommend that if anybody's looking at getting into the process of building software, even thinking about it, I really love the book, The Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olson. I think it gives a wonderful overview of all the different things you should do before, how you think through the process, working with companies. It talks about that UI UX thing we mentioned, which is user interface and user experience. I've read that book so many times, even after doing projects, that I think I might have to get a new copy. It's pretty worn out. But the thing about it is that, like Bonica had said, you want to identify what your minimum viable product is, your MVP. And once you know that, you can really cut down your cost because you can come out with something that you can bring to the market and test to verify that this will work. And that MVP again, reduces your costs, gets it out faster, and allows you to validate your idea. What you don't want to do is spend 10 times that to get the entire product out, only to find out that maybe it didn't work. So the MVP is important. Another term that's really big in software is called product market fit. And product market fit is where when you create your MVP, okay, that minimum viable product, and you start to release it, you start to see, hey, does this resonate with my customers, with my market? Do they love this? Is this really solving their problem? And so you use that opportunity to get feedback and kind of find out, okay, we need to now add these features, or we need to do this before we fully launch. And then once you have that, there's another famous term that I enjoy called crossing the chasm. And crossing the chasm is where you are then trying to get the majority of the market to adopt the product itself. Okay. But if you start with the market, you don't have to worry about product market fit. You don't have to worry about crossing the chasm, because you already know this is going to fit the market. You already know that the market is going to adopt it.
Yeah. I mean, again, a plus one for building the audience first in some regard, having an email list, using that to survey, etc. What was the name of that book again, Dave?
It was the Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olson.
Nice. Thank you for that. And then in terms of partnerships, let's say you have this amazing idea, but maybe you're not necessarily known or have an audience in that space yet, but partnering with somebody who is in that space would make sense. What does that look like in terms of partnership? Are you sharing equity, or are they paying for some of it? What do those deals kind of look like?
Yeah. So generally in the past for myself, what I prefer doing, and it doesn't mean that my process is the exact process somebody else should do, is that let's say this person has a large market. They have a website, they have YouTube, they've generated an email list, and through conversation, we've realized that this person knows that if only they could build this thing, if they could build the software, that their market would love it. And let's face it, if you really interact with your market, you'll know what it is. Okay, it could be that there's this thing that you're already selling and people are buying it through your affiliate, but you just know you could make it better, you can improve it. There are things that can be done. That's a wonderful situation. But again, sometimes the fear of starting a software overcomes the person from taking that step. Or maybe they went to Upwork, they grabbed a programmer, and the programmer totally messed it up, and so they've had a bad experience in the past. What I generally will do is I'll come up and acknowledging that they have that, and that, yes, this makes sense. I agree that market is. Then what we'll do is we'll build the software, and we'll do like an equity stake play where, depending on whether the person wants us to cover the entire cost of its development, there's a certain percentage we'll ask, but basically me, my team, we will then go and we'll work to ensure that the right product is built. And then once that's built, we'll have the market owner to then execute certain things to ensure that, it's a great opportunity, new revenue stream, and profitability.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That helps a lot. And so this is where relationships come into play, and why putting yourself out there, knowing people, is really, really important. And we talk about that a lot. The best way to grow your online business is to get offline and start meeting people. Bhanuka, I want to ask you about, and this might be an interesting question, but what are some of the hidden costs that a lot of people coming to you might not even know exist? I don't want to say was caught off guard, but I had forgotten that if I'm developing a software that requires some sort of database or server, that I'm going to have to likely pay for Amazon AWS, and that comes with a cost. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So maybe we can enlighten the audience and help them understand what hidden costs might be there that they can look forward to, or at least plan for.
So there are two specific hidden costs that I think are interesting. One's obvious and the other one is not obvious. The obvious hidden cost is the fact that you are going to have to pay for third-party servers. The first thing is, if you are building something like a website, you're paying for your hosting, you're paying for your SSL certificate, and things that you're used to. Softwares, depending on the nature of the tool that you're building, that can be slightly more complicated. You can be potentially paying for third-party libraries and tools and features that you may not want to build the whole thing, and you want to integrate different systems and tools that are already built. For example, Pat, we're using this podcasting platform. If the people that are building it may not want to build the video encoding technology themselves, they may just license it from a Zoom type thing. And then every minute that it's being used, there is a pricing model where Zoom will charge X amount of dollars, right? We can plan what those costs are going to be at an architectural level when we're designing the software to understand, hey, does this make sense? Because some of these things become exponentially expensive as you have more and more usage. And if your business model doesn't really cater to that, you might be in a situation where it's tricky. For example, if you're using heavy server space and you decide that you want the product to be free, you may end up eating tons and tons of costs as you scale. So there's some things you need to keep in mind. The other cost is something that you don't really think about when you get started, is the fact that you're not just building a tool. In most cases, you're building a business. And there is a cost of time that you need to consider to build something, because you have to over communicate and explain what is in your head, which is purely just in your head, to a whole group of other people. You can't do that by having a single conversation. And, just like anything, you need to communicate. And the other thing when you're building a business is that it's very rarely something you can wrap up and walk away with, because technology changes, your market changes, who you're competing with is going to change, and what the expectation of the tool or product or service you're building today may not even be remotely close to what is necessary in 6 months or a year. Does not mean the tool won't work in a year, but if the entire market catches up to you and you're doing nothing and you're waiting, then you're setting yourself up to fail. Very few businesses can get away doing that. And if you don't build something that can and that needs to consistently compete with the market, you need to keep that in mind when you're building a piece of technology, because then we have yet to encounter a service or a situation where we build something, we put it in a box, we forget about it and never talk about it again. You either, just like anything, you are either growing your business and things are going well, or you're stopping and then it starts to die from the day that you stop. And if you're not cognizant about that, if you're not thinking about that, I think it would be premature to get into the world of software, to start a project just because you think, oh, I can do this for a week and then everything's going to be great and I can forget about it and it'll just be like free money, right? The one thing that we know about passive income is it's very rarely passive.
Correct. Very, very true. Thank you for that. That is an honest answer, and I appreciate that. And it's important to know that if you're going to get into this, it is going to be a commitment, right? It is something that you're going to have to commit to, and it's going to require upkeep. And so as technologies change, I found this to be the case in the world of WordPress. It was like as soon as we came out with our podcast plugin, it was like, new version of WordPress. And it was like, oh gosh, we got to make sure this thing's compatible now. I mean, same thing happened with my iPhone app company in 2009. It was just like not even worth it to keep up anymore, because not just because it was so competitive, but because there were all these changes and things happening so quickly. So definitely something to pay attention to. However, it can also be incredibly lucrative, obviously, especially when you get users in there and recurring revenue. And I do want to ask a question to both of you about building a software to eventually sell. And we'll get to that more toward the end. But Dave, I want to ask you about working with a developer as an entrepreneur. How often are you checking in? What's comfortable? Is it a give them all the info, the wireframes, everything, and you're kind of like, okay, let it bake for 6 months and then they come back? Or what is in your experience, has been a really good cadence for checking in, seeing iterations? How do you do that without micromanaging the entire process?
Well, I mean, when I first started out, it was pretty easy to not micromanage because I didn't know what to do. But I was also very blessed to have a team at my disposal. And so I'm going to answer that question as if you have a group of professional programmers working with you. That would be very different answer if I was working with one individual I say found on like Upwork or Fiverr or something like that. What was really good for me was that the team would always ask me the right questions before they would start. So like I'd fill out this form that helps them to understand some of the details, and the questions themselves would ask me things that I had not thought about. And so I actually had to spend time and be like, oh man, I need to go figure this out. That's a good point. And so by filling that out, that was sent over. And then the team would set up a meeting and they would ask even more questions. And the goal was that team would then take all of the information when they really feel like they understand what it is the project is. What I love most about the team I work with is they will go and they will do their research and they will figure out, hey, okay, this is what it's going to look like. And they come back with a plan. And this plan tells me when they want to meet with me, when they think that they're going to have something ready for me to check. And it's all laid out before me. And so then at that point, I'm following their plan. I'm there to give input. Now, over the weeks, or so, there might be some random emails here when they maybe hit something like, whoa, this is something none of us had thought about. Hey, quick question here. What are your thoughts? And so I might get an email here or there, but generally I have a tempo of maybe 1 to 2 times a week we meet up just to check. And those are almost always pre-scheduled unless there's some kind of big thing jumping in. That has allowed me to really be able to kind of, once you get that initial work set and the team understands things, then at that point, it's executing a plan, which is really nice. But like Bonica said, you're not just building your software, you're building a business. And so there's a lot of other things as an entrepreneur that you should be preparing while the team is building that software. It's thinking about like, how do you want to price things? How do you want to launch it? Do you want to do a beta launch where you just get a couple of people in just to play with it and either possibly break it or find that random outlier case where the person put in code, as their description and it breaks some? You just start to find these little weird things. Maybe you don't want to do a beta, or maybe you want to do your MVP, but not really launch it paid until you have a next set of features. The point though is that as a business person, you have to start thinking about what it is you want to do to prepare for its launch. Maybe you even have a landing page. There's a lot of things going on there as well.
Lovely. That's perfect. Bonica, from your position during those check-ins, first of all, it has been great to know, okay, we're going to check in during these times, and the expectation of something to look at and see. What would you recommend to somebody who is going through that process and perhaps they catch something that they're like, well, this isn't what I was hoping for, or this is not exactly what I was expecting? I think it's obviously important to bring honesty and just like solve those things, sooner than later. But what would be your recommendation and the mindset that a person should have when going into those sort of show and tells, if you will? Because I know some people are left often very disappointed or even upset, but also maybe afraid to say something because they don't want to delay the project even more. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. How do you best approach those check-ins in those situations?
Over communicate, because the problem is the people on one side have no idea what's in your head. And if you're going in a direction that you're not happy with, if you don't vocalize it, there's literally no way for you to know. I'll give an example, which was probably our most unsuccessful project to date, which was a project in the video education space where our team's been working with a client. There's been a certain set of misunderstandings, and the team refused to tell the client because they were afraid to hurt billings. The client refused to tell the team something. And then both sides were just chugging along because technically the goals were being met, but you weren't really building something at the end of the day that was solving the problem for the customer. And what I tell anyone that we work with is you should have tension on both sides, because at some point there's going to be a little bit of tension, and that's going to be in the best interest of the product. Just like you say, when you're building something and there's competition in a market, the customer always wins. When there's tension between the programming team and the product owner, the product tends to be of a better quality. It's very rarely do you say, hey, this is what we're building, smooth road, zero issues. Hey, we're done exactly in time and exactly the way you wanted, and that you had in your head, if you're not kind of pushing and pulling on both sides. Fortunately, in the case with that project, we ended up coming to a situation where we said, because the customer didn't understand what was going on, we decided to not build the customer. We kind of redo an entire stack of product, which cost us close to a year, and then reinitiate after that. But realistically, looking back at it, we're not perfect. We've made mistakes. But if we had an open and honest conversation and said, hey, I did not like this because of this, and then our team to say the same things back to the customer, hey, you're not really effective at telling what you have in your mind. Some of these things could have been a couple of conversations and resolved, but instead you spend a year trying to figure out what's going on. So in all of these conversations, just like, you're building any relationship, over communicating is a lot better than the opposite.
Yeah, sometimes I like to give the example of, it's like working with an interior decorator. You have an interior decorator, they know what they're doing. They come in, they tell you, okay, great, we're going to do this, this, and this. And you're like, if you don't stop and be like, whoa, 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 I'm not going for modern Nash, I'm going for classical. And then maybe they run off with classical. And again, they'll build something, but if you're not there to redirect them or to guide them or to tell them, I do not like that chair, I do not like that color, what's going to end up happening is they're going to continue to build something down the road that's technically correct, but it's not what you're looking for. And so it's really important to kind of communicate those. And as a good interior designer will say, you can't hurt my feelings. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you like. And I think that's the best way to handle software as well.
Exactly. And design is subjective. And so communication key, we talk about that when working with a VA. In the beginning, you're going to have to tell them what's working and what's not and work together. And that's exactly what you're doing with your developer too. In fact, even in our project together, in our first call, I was shown a few examples of some UI, UX, and I was like, well, that's not quite what I was looking for. And so I came back with some drawings and just was like, hey, here's exactly what I was kind of hoping so we can simplify things. And it was like, cool. And everybody was happy and nobody was like, oh, more work to do. It's like, no, this is what needs to happen. And I'm very grateful for that. So I'm looking forward to the next call so we can see the next iteration and see where we're at. And that's really key. So to finish up here, I was actually really surprised when we were talking. It was like one of the questions you asked me when we were starting the development process on this giveaway tool was, what are your goals for this? And you had even said, is this going to be a small thing on the side? Are you going to turn this into a full business and run it with a team? Or are you looking to sell this? And I was like, yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. And I was curious, how does a development process change or differ if indeed the goal is to sell this thing? Because that ultimately is, I've already shared this, the long-term goal of this project is to sell it. So what's the difference? How do we approach, or what is, Dave, maybe I'll start with you. When developing a tool to sell, what does that mean in terms of the development process exactly?
Well, this also comes back to making sure that you have a good team of programmers with you. One thing that's incredibly important for transferring over software to a buyer is that it's got proper documentation. We call it kind of like enterprise level, because what's going to happen is that if you transfer the software over, if you sell the software, the company, to somebody else, and maybe they have their own programmers and they're like, I only want my people working on it. If they can't figure out what's going on inside the program, sometimes without proper documentation, it's like walking into a hoarder's house, right? The hoarder knows where everything is, but the individual has no idea. The toothbrush ends up in the kitchen, or whatever it is. The problem is that proper documentation is going to be incredible. Now, most of the time, though, if you're looking to sell, say, to a VC or to a private equity group or something like that, what they're going to want is they're going to want to have access to the team that built it. And so that's one of those things where, luckily, like with the way that I have it with Surge, is that those same programmers will still work on the program and they still maintain that knowledge. And so it's not one of those things where the buyer might be worried that they won't get the same technical team that you had to keep working on it. So that's an important aspect to keep in mind. Okay, documentation, and that you have a strong programming team that will work with the program when you sell it. Another thing that's really important as well is that when designing the software, like Pat, you are a big personality. You are very recognizable. I think as you start this, it's very important for your listeners to know that this is your product. That being said, though, is you might not want to call it like Pat Flynn's software, because at that point, somebody else buying it doesn't want to buy it with your name, even though you're not a part of it anymore. Same thing goes with, as you get ready to sell, you might want to remove the pictures of you or whatever it is, so that the buyer doesn't think that, well, the only reason why the software is successful is because Pat is the person on the software. It's kind of like a website too. Like, you don't want to have Dave Chesson's website, because that's going to be really hard to sell. So you need to kind of keep that in mind. One thing I will say, though, about software is it's the multiple for selling a software is incredible. It's usually, and again, this is just kind of broad stroke, but if you're selling a website, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 times EBITDA, which is like the profit, if you will. But when you start looking at, like I say, a one-off software, you're looking at 6 to 8. And if you're in a SaaS, which is software as a service, so it's a monthly fee where people are paying monthly to use it, you're well over 10 times annual reoccurring revenue. You might even be into 20 times. And so it's a very valuable asset, especially if you have profitability or you're showing any type of growth. There are a lot of PEGs or private equity groups that would love to have a cash generating SaaS that's growing.
Yeah. And that's part of the attraction here for me as well. On top of, obviously, just I would use this tool even if only I was using it because I need it, right? Which I think bodes well to its usefulness in the market in general. So thank you for that answer, Dave. Maybe same question to you, Anuka, in terms of like, when developing this, any tips for anybody who is interested in eventually getting this to the point of sale?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question that I would have is, how do you get there? Do you have a business plan which kind of explains the numbers in a way that it gets there? Or are you trying to force growth for it to happen? Because the way that you build technology the teams, the level of kind of complexity does change. For example, if you are trying to launch a product with 1 million people that are standing at the gate ready to jump in, the way you would address security and kind of compliancy and all of that is completely different in the case that we're working with trying to launch a new Pat, where you're trying to be the first user and we are aware that the first couple of times the product is being used, it's going to break, and that's okay. Eventually, the idea is to be able to get into a point where it's ready and kind of battle tested to be able to sell. But the way you prioritize it is really a prioritization of resources strategy, right? You don't want to spend too much money up front before you know whether the product is working or not. And you as a founder and operator need to understand where you're spending your time, your energy, and your resources to be able to build the best product. And of course, as you get to levels of scale and selling with millions of dollars in revenue and millions of active users, you need to think about things like GDPR compliancy. Is the data safe? Especially if you're working in healthcare, you have to abide by kind of HIPAA compliancy laws. If you have minors in your application, are you disability friendly? Like, these are things that you have to think about when you come to a commercial standpoint and enterprise software, which the average person that's just getting into programming or trying to launch their first product is really not thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, that's really important. I mean, there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And, the best way to figure this out is to obviously work with a team who knows what they're doing. Surge has been incredible to work with so far, and we're definitely going to keep everybody up to date as we go. This will likely, who knows, this recording and the videos with it will one day be in a documentary. I don't know. We'll see. But working with the team and also having conversations. That's why I wanted to bring both of you on today, and to surround ourselves with people who have done these things before or who are in the middle of it is the best way to learn. And so I appreciate both of you for coming on today. Bhanuka, tell me a little bit more about where people can go to check out Surge, and in case they're curious of working with you, where can they go?
I like to be as accessible as possible. So you can just go to surge.global. Our website has all the information that you need. There's a big contact page to get in touch with Surge. If you want to reach out to me directly for any advice or really anything about software and marketing and technology, I'm always open. I'm active on LinkedIn as well as Instagram, and I'm sure you can search my name and find me.
I appreciate it, man. Congrats on the engagement and all the success thus far, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you, Bhanuka. Thank you so much. Dave, same question. Where can people go to learn more about what you got going on your end?
Yeah, sure. You can go to aegis.investments, and you can kind of, if you want to go there, you can see the portfolio of the things that we're working on. You can reach out and contact us there. Otherwise, though, I'm still answering all the emails in kindlepreneur.com. So if you go to the contact page there, just send me over any questions you have. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Amazing. Thank you both, seriously, for this valuable information today and for your time. And we'll chat soon. Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers. Thanks for having us.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Hopefully you can tell recently I've been going a little bit deeper into some very specific topics here on the channel. Last week we talked about copywriting and we got the pastor model from Ray Edwards. Today we're going into software. Next week we're going to go into funnels and lead generation. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out, because we got a lot of stuff coming your way. And again, I hope this was helpful for you. All the links will be available in the show notes. Thank you to Dave, thank you to Bhanuka, and thank you to the team over at Surge Global. By the time you listen to this, I should be a month or two ahead of where we were when we recorded this. And again, more information about this journey coming out soon. This is definitely a commitment, but one that I'm excited about, not just because it's going to create a software that may be sold one day, we'll see, but it's one that I get to take you along the ride for, because that's what I love to do. I want to do more of that. Thank you so much. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to the Smart Passive Income podcast at smartpassiveincome.com. I'm your host, Pat Flynn. Sound editing by Duncan Brown. Our senior producer is David Grabowski, and our executive producer is Matt Gartland. The Smart Passive Income podcast is a production of SPI Media and a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network. Catch you next week. Hey there, quick pause here because I have to tell you about a tool that completely transforms the podcasting workflow. Riverside. I get it. I used to juggle multiple platforms just to record one podcast episode. It was exhausting. Zoom for recording, Audacity for editing, and then a bunch of different apps just to create clips and social posts. I've tried other ones as well. They were okay, but they were clunky and super time consuming. That's where Riverside has massively helped. I can do it all in one place: recording, editing, repurposing, one platform, one streamlined flow. I just log in, record with my guests no matter where they are in the world, and just like that, studio quality audio and high resolution video all in one. And get this, even if your Wi-Fi glitches, Riverside records locally on your device so everything sounds and looks crystal clear. But here's my favorite feature: Riverside's AI editing tool. You can remove silences and filler words with just one click. Hours saved. With Magic Clips, Riverside also automatically finds the best moments and turns them into ready-to-post videos for YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, all without the extra editing. So if you're looking to level up your production quality and simplify your workflow, go to smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside and use code SMART to get 1 month free on the Pro plan. That's smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside, promo code SMART. It's built by creators for creators, and I think you're going to love it. Have you dreamt about being your own boss, but still haven't made the first steps to making that dream a reality? Well, I get that. Starting a business can feel super overwhelming with legal forms, paperwork, finances. It's a lot. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about Taylor Brands. Taylor is a complete business builder designed to make launching your business simple and stress-free. You can register your LLC in just minutes, keeping your personal assets and the business assets separate from day one. From there, you get access to everything you need to get off the ground: legal documents, licenses and permits, invoicing and bookkeeping tools, and even a 100-day business coaching program, all designed to help you hit the ground running. You'll also get a free personalized business plan, branding tools, and so much more. And of course, listeners of this show get an exclusive 35% discount to get started. All you have to do is head to taylorbrands.com/SPI. That's TAILORBRANDS.com/SPI. Stop dreaming, start building with Taylor Brands.